Hello everyone. Today in this session I will talk on the concept of respiratory system, and it is one of the important topic in the syllabus of CBSE 9th class, and it is also there in the ICSE board examinations with respect to the classes 9th or 10th. And in the beginning, for the introduction of respiratory system, I would like to add a note on the fact that within the human body, there are found a large number of organ systems, and each organ system is meant for a particular function. And so is the respiratory system is there. Respiratory system is meant for the purpose of exchange of respiratory gases, and it is responsible for delivery of oxygen to our body cells and tissues, and likewise, the carbon dioxide, it is removed from the body with the help of a respiratory system. So this is the main function of the respiratory system, that is, it helps in the transportation of respiratory gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide. And if I would first of all add to the organization and functions of the respiratory system, the human respiratory system, it is divisible into the two important parts. The first one is called as upper respiratory tract, and the second part is known as lower respiratory tract. Upper respiratory tract as well as the lower respiratory tract. The upper respiratory tract is comprised of regions of respiratory system starting from the nose up to the larynx, whereas a lower respiratory tract is comprised of regions from trachea or windpipe up to the lungs. And the upper respiratory tract is also referred with the name of conducting portion. It is also known as conducting portion because it helps in the transportation of air or the respiratory gases. And I have already told you this upper respiratory tract is comprised of the various organs like nose, nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, including the trachea and progressively small airways from primary bronchi up to the terminal bronchioles. And the second portion, which is the lowermost portion of lower respiratory tract, and that is called as a respiratory portion, that helps in the gaseous exchange. And it is comprised of small sac-like structures which are referred to the name of alveoli or air sacs. The alveoli or air sacs, these are found within the lungs, and they help in the exchange of the respiratory gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide. Other portion of the respiratory system, they only act as conducting portion starting from the nose up to the inner surface of lungs. But the alveoli parts of the lungs, they act as respiratory portion because they help in the exchange of respiratory gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide. And in this picture, you may see the various organs of respiratory tract in case of the human beings, starting from the nose up to the alveoli. And if you see, first of all, the first part of the respiratory system is the nose, and the second portion is a nasal cavity. The third one is known as pharynx. The fourth one is the larynx, and then there is a trachea or windpipe, then primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, which finally terminates in the small sac-like structures known as alveolus or alveoli, and there are the lungs in which these bronchial intercom or alveoli are reported. So the upper portion of respiratory system is the conducting portion up to the inner surface of lungs, whereas the alveoli, they are well beset with the blood capillaries, and they have the thin wall, and they act as respiratory gas surfaces, and they help in the exchange of the respiratory gases. And the main function of the respiratory system is not only to help in the exchange of the respiratory gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide, but it also helps us to produce the sound. And in addition to that, within the nose, there are found the receptors for smell, which are known as the olfactory receptors. And with the help of those ones, we are capable to detect a particular kind of the smell. And some accessory function of the respiratory system is also comprised of the purpose of excretion, because excess water as well as the heat is also ejected out from the surface of the lungs. And by mixing of respiratory gases inside the bloodstream, the pH of the blood is controlled and it is maintained up to 7.4. It means that the regulation of the blood pH is another subsidiary function of respiratory system. And if we study the detail of the respiratory tract in case of the human beings or respiratory system in case of the human beings, I have already told you the first portion of the respiratory system is the nose area, and the nose is simply act as inlet or gates for the respiratory system. That is, in other words, it helps the oxygen to enter into the respiratory tract and it acts as a opening for ejection of carbon dioxide. And this nose leads into a spacious cavity which is called as a nasal cavity. The nasal cavity is divisible into the two nasal chambers which are known as the right nasal chamber and left nasal chamber. And these two nasal chambers, they are separated by means of nasal septum. They are separated by means of the nasal septum. Keep in mind, anterior or a distal portion of nasal septum is cartilaginous. It is made up of elastic cartilage, whereas the posterior portion of the nasal septum is bony. So that's why it is possible to help to show the flexibility of the anterior region of the nose area or the nasal cavity area in contrast to the posterior section of the nasal chambers or nasal cavity. And within the nasal cavity or within the nasal chambers, there are the three important regions. The lowermost region is known as vestibular region. Middle region is called as respiratory region, and uppermost area of the nasal chamber or the nasal cavity is known as olfactory region. Keep in mind, we can easily remember these three regions by a simple mnemonic VRO. That is, the lower region is vestibular, middle region is respiratory, and upper region is olfactory. And this vestibular region of the nasal cavity, it is lined with the hairs and glands. The hairs, they filter the air that tries to enter within the respiratory tract, whereas the glands, which are known as the nasal gland, they secrete the wax, and the wax basically traps the bacteria and foreign particle that tries to enter within the respiratory system. The middle portion is known as respiratory region. This region is well based with the blood vessels, and these blood vessels radiates heat just like the hot water pipes, and it helps in air conditioning. That is, the air that enters into the lungs, that is air conditioned before it is getting its role within the respiratory tract. And finally, the uppermost region of the nasal cavity is known as olfactory region. It is aligned with the olfactory epithelium, and it is further having the sensory cells which are called as olfactory cells. These cells helps in the sensation of smell. In case of the human beings, the olfactory region is developed up to the limited extent, but in case of the dogs, it is well developed. That's why the dogs, they have good sense of smell. Then furthermore, the surface area of the nasal cavity is further increased by means of folds. There are the three folds which are found inside the each nasal chamber of the nasal cavity, and these three folds are respectively referred with reference to their position as superior nasal concha, middle nasal concha, and inferior nasal concha. These three nasal conchae, they increases the interior surface area of the nasal cavity, and it helps in better functioning of the nose. Then the next portion after the nasal cavity is the internal nostrils. The internal openings of nasal cavity that leads into the pharynx. These are known as internal nostrils or internal nares, and internal nares, they open into the pharynx, which is called as nasopharyngeal part of the pharynx. Then the next portion of the respiratory system is the pharynx. And pharynx is basically defined as a common passageway both for respiration as well as for the food material. And the pharynx act as therefore the common organ both for the respiratory system as well as for the digestive system. This pharynx is divisible into the three portions. One is referred with the name of nasopharynx. Second is known as oropharynx, and the third one is called as laryngopharynx. The pharynx is having the three important portions. You may see the pharynx is having the three important areas: nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. The nasopharynx, it is the uppermost region of the pharynx area, and the nose or internal nares opens into that particular area of the pharynx. And it is the aperture or opening for respiratory gases only. No food particle can enter into the nasopharyngeal area. The middle portion is known as the oropharynx. This is a portion of the pharynx that follows the oral cavity, that follows the mouth, and this is a portion both for air as well as the food material. That is, in other words, I want to say both air and food material can enter into the oropharyngeal area. And the last portion of the pharynx is known as laryngopharynx, and this laryngopharynx is the portion of the pharynx that is followed by the larynx or sound box. And laryngopharynx helps in the production of sound as well along with the larynx or sound box. You may see this is a nasopharynx area that particularly follows the nasal cavity. The second portion is known as the oropharynx that basically followed by the mouth, and the laryngopharynx is the area which is leading into the sound box or larynx. There are the three important parts of the pharynx. Then the next important portion of the respiratory system after the pharynx is larynx. The larynx is commonly called as the voice box or sound box. Keep in mind, in case of the birds, the voice box or sound box is referred with the name of syrinx. In human beings, in case of majority of the mammals, it is referred with the name of larynx. So this larynx is also acting as a portion of the respiratory system because air passes through it during the process of respiration. And our pharynx is comprised of 9 different cartilages. There are found the 9 different cartilages within our larynx portion, and the opening of the larynx is referred with the name of glottis, and it is basically capped by a leaf-like structure known with the name of epiglottis. And the various prominent cartilages which are found in the larynx, they include the thyroid cartilage. You may see the thyroid cartilage. It is referred with the name thyroid cartilage because it is associated with the thyroid gland. And beneath the thyroid cartilage, there is found a prominent C-shaped cartilage which is incomplete posteriorly, and this is called as cricoid cartilage. These are the two major cartilages of the larynx area, thyroid and cricoid. And the thyroid cartilage, it is also having a median V-shaped notch. And this median V-shaped notch, it is more prominent in case of human males in comparison to the females. And in case of human males, it developed more due to the secretion of testosterone hormone. But in case of the female, it is little developed. And in case of the human male, it is referred with the name of Adam apple. And due to the more development of this Adam apple or this prominent V-shaped notch of the thyroid cartilage, the voice is more thick and it is having low pitch in case of the male in contrast to the females, which are having comparatively high pitched voice. And in addition to these two cartilages, there are also found other cartilages, like we can say that there is found cricothyroid ligament or cartilage. There is found, we can say that arytenoid cartilage, cuneiform cartilage, etc. within the larynx. Keep in mind, there are 9 different cartilages in the larynx. And these 9 cartilages, they are incomplete posteriorly. That is, they are only present in front. They are not present at the back of the larynx. Thyroid cartilage is a single cartilage. It is unpaired cartilage. I have already told you it is known as Adam's apple in case of the male, and it is hyaline in nature, and it also possesses the vocal folds inside it with the help of which the sound is produced. Then the cricoid cartilage. It is the ring-shaped cartilage which is present beneath the thyroid cartilage. I have already stated to you. And the third one, the arytenoid cartilage, they are paired cartilage, cuneiform cartilage, these are the paired cartilage, corniculate cartilages, these are paired cartilages, and epiglottis is the unpaired cartilage which basically acts as cap for the glottis or opening of the larynx. Then The larynx is capable of producing the sound because it is having the vocal cords inside it. And there are two pairs of the vocal cords which are found inside the larynx. And these are respectively referred with the name of true vocal cords and false vocal cords. The superior vocal cords, these are called as a false, whereas the inferior vocal cords, these are known as a true. I want to say the vocal cords which are found at the lower part of the larynx, these are referred with the name of true vocal cords, whereas the vocal cords which are found on the upper part of the larynx, these are called as a false vocal cords. False vocal cords are named so because they are comparatively thicker, that is, they act as a thick membrane and they have a little role in the production of the sounds. Whereas the true vocal cords, these are a pair of thin membranes which can do the vibration when the air strikes against them, and due to their vibration the sound is produced. It means that the sound is produced due to the vibration of second pair of vocal cords which are inferior in the larynx area, and therefore these are referred with the name of true vocal cords. And the opening between the two vocal cords is referred with the name of rima glottis. Keep in mind, the opening between the vocal cords is known as rima glottis, and rima glottis is basically formed when the larynx is resting. That is when there is no any sound production. At the time of sound production, this rima glottis disappear due to the fusion of these two membranes, and these two membranes, they start vibrating. The sound is then reduced. Then the larynx leads into the next portion of the respiratory tract, which is called as trachea. Trachea is commonly called as a windpipe, and this trachea, it is supported by the cartilaginous rings which are incomplete posteriorly. I want to say the cartilaginous rings, they are only present on the ventral side of the trachea. They are not present on the back side of the trachea, and these cartilaginous rings, they prevent the clasping of the trachea when there is no air inside it. That is a trachea. It is conducting the air to the lungs, and they act as windpipes, but they are well supported by cartilaginous rings which are present over them. These cartilaginous rings, they prevent the clasping of the trachea when there is no air inside it. And these rings, they are continued when the trachea bifurcates into the two branches. The two branches of the trachea, these are referred with the name of primary bronchi. The primary bronchi, as they enter into the lung, they further get divided into secondary bronchi. Secondary bronchi get divides into the tertiary bronchi, then bronchioles, and finally terminates into the sac-like structures which are referred with the name of alveoli. This network of branches, along with the alveoli within the lungs, produced by the bronchi, it is referred with the name of bronchial intercom, or it is also referred with the name of bronchial tree or respiratory tree. Because if you see the structure of these branches of the bronchi by upside down view, you may look like it as a tree which is basically spreading its branches. And furthermore, we can say these alveoli, which are finally formed by the termination of the alveolar ducts, they act as respiratory gas surfaces. They help in the exchange of respiratory gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide. So you may see within the lungs, as the bronchi, they enter, they conduct the air within the lungs. Finally, they carry the air up to the surface of alveoli. And these alveoli, they are the small sac-like structures. Keep in mind, in single lung, there are found near about 300 million alveoli in each lung. And each alveoli is having a respiratory membrane, thin membrane, which help in the exchange of the respiratory gases. That is the air which is coming from the nose, that is having more percentage of oxygen. This air moves from nose into nasal cavity, nasal cavity to pharynx, pharynx to larynx, larynx to trachea, trachea to bronchi, bronchi to finally up to the surface of alveoli, and when they reach up to the surface of alveoli, alveoli are having well supply of capillaries or blood. Therefore, as per diffusion pressures, as per partial pressures, the oxygen being having more concentration in the alveoli jumps into the blood, whereas the blood is having the more concentration of the carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide jumps back into alveoli. I want to say, according to the partial pressure gradients, the oxygen jumps from the alveoli into the blood, and carbon dioxide jumps from the blood into the alveoli and carried back into the nasal cavity, and then it is shed out. Then each lung, it is actually a sac-like structure which is holding these alveoli, and we have the two unequal lungs. That is, we are having a pair of lungs which are well protected inside the thoracic cage. They are protected by ribs. On the ventral side, they are protected by backbone or vertebral column. On the dorsal side, they are protected by diaphragm on the lower side. And the lungs, they are further having the protective membranes over them. And the protective membranes of lungs, they are known as pleura. The double membrane enveloped pleura, it is having the outer membrane known as parietal pleura and inner membrane which is called as visceral pleura. And in between the two pleural membrane, there is found the pleural fluid that basically acts as a lubricant for the membrane. And the right lung and left lung, you may see, the right lung is quite bigger than the left lung. The right lung is having the three lobes, which are designated by the names according to their position as superior lobe, middle lobe, and inferior lobe, whereas a left lung is having only the two lobes. One is called as superior, second is known as inferior. Right lung is having the weight near about 700 grams, whereas the left lung is having the weight near about 600 grams. It means that the left lung is quite smaller than the right lung, and the left lung is also having a notch in its medial border, and this median notch in the lower border of left lung, it is known as a cardiac notch, and this cardiac notch is meant for giving the space for the accommodation of the heart, thymus gland, as well as a part of esophagus. Mediastinum, this space which is created between the two lungs due to the presence of the cardiac notch on the left lung, it is known as a mediastinum. And this mediastinum is having not only the heart, but it is also having the thymus gland and a part of the esophagus. Then furthermore, when the respiration is carried, it is carried with a rate 12 breaths per minute, and this is referred with the name of respiratory rate. And primarily, the values of respiratory rate are determining the physiology as well as functionality of a normal person. That is, if the breathing rate is greater than 12, which means that something is different within the physiology of the body is not physiologically fit. And if the breathing rate is lower than the 12, again, it is the indication that the physiology of the body is not working well. There may be a defect in any of the organ system, whether it is the respiratory or cardiac system, or it is the nervous system. And when there is a temporary increase or decrease in the breath, it is associated with a temporary condition, that is rest and exercise. And the respiratory volumes are basically measured with the help of an instrument which is called as a spirometer. And these respiratory air volumes are also known as lung volumes. For example, we have tidal volume. What is tidal volume? Tidal volume is defined as the volume of air which is inspired with each normal breath. I want to say amount of oxygen which is inspired normally, or amount of carbon dioxide which is expired normally in one breath. It is referred with the name of tidal volume, and this tidal volume is having the value near about 500 ml. This tidal volume is again having the two important. This tidal volume is again having the two important parts. One is called as alveolar volume and second is called as dead space volume. Alveolar volume is the volume of air that can reach up to the surface of alveoli for respiratory gas exchange, whereas the dead space volume is comprised of volume of air which cannot reach up to the respiratory surfaces of alveoli and they remain in the respiratory ducts. So it means that TV, tidal volume, is equivalent to AV plus DSV. AV stand for alveolar volume and DSV stand for dead space volume. AV is 350 ml and DSV is 550 ml. AV stand for alveolar volume, the volume of air that reaches up to the respiratory surfaces of alveoli, and dead space volume, the volume of air that remains in the upper respiratory tract which is not engaged in the respiratory function. That is 350 plus 150 is equivalent to 500 ml. This is a tidal volume. And if I conclude on the tidal volume, I can say tidal volume is the amount of air, amount of oxygen or carbon dioxide which is basically used in one normal breath. Then the second important kind of lung volume is known as inspiratory reservoir volume. That is after the act of normal inspiration, the amount of air which can be inspired more, that is referred with the name of inspiratory reservoir volume. That is a maximum volume that can be inspired over the inspiration of the tidal volume or normal breath. This is called as an inspiratory reservoir volume and it is having the value 3100 ml. That is, it is almost 6 times of tidal volume. Then there is expiratory reservoir volume. That is when we show the expiration, that is ejection of carbon dioxide. Even after the normal expiration, we can expire some more amount of air, and that amount of air which can be expired in addition to normal expiration, that is called as a ERV or expiratory reserve volume, and it is having the value of 1200 ml. Then next important value is the residual volume. Residual volume is the volume of air that remains inside the lungs after a maximum expiration. I want to say when you expire forcefully, even after that, some amount of air is left inside the lungs, and this is called with the name of residual volume. And it cannot be measured by means of spirometer. Its value is near about 1200 ml. And this is the graphical representation of the various kinds of respiratory air volumes. And keep in mind, the major ones are tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume, expiratory reserve volume, and residual volume. And you may see inspiratory reserve volume, it is 3100 ml, tidal volume it is 500 ml, expiratory reserve volume it is 1200 ml, and residual volume is again it is 1200 ml in volume. Thank you so much. And if you have any query or if you have any question, you may post your query on the YouTube channel. Thank you so much.